Let's talk about New Zealand's native science, which you can imagine the wokists love and venerate, and think that this is the equivalent of actual science. It's called Mataranga. Have you ever heard
Um,
of this?
no, I haven't.
There's no reason you should have done.
I'm going to assume this is all going to be very hippy dippy spiritual
Well,
nonsense.
it's tribal nonsense.
Oh, okay.
And so, in fact, we'll go through it. So this is just from sciencelearn.org.new Zealand. Mataranga Maori is a modern term for the combined knowledge of Polynesian ancestors and the experiences of Maori living in the environment of Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, Maori from New Zealand. The term takes many forms, such as language, education, traditional environmental knowledge, traditional knowledge of cultural practice, such as healings and medicines, fishing, and cultivation. Right. So this is just tribal customs bound up into one sort of overarching, what they call body of knowledge, and it is in a way it is actually a sort of body of knowledge, but it's local, parochial, particular, and centralized on New Zealand. Right. So you couldn't take this somewhere else and apply these principles and get the same results because it's not science, right?
Yeah.
It's
a set of traditions.
it's a set of traditions and cultures and customs for a particular people in a particular time in a particular place, right? Not science, frankly. That's the opposite of science, which is, universal, empirical, and not bound to any one time or place. Science is true whether you like it or not.
And science is always seeking to refute itself, whereas traditions are always seeking to propagate themselves.
And reinforce themselves. Exactly correct, right? And so they say in the traditional sense, Mataranga Maori refers to the knowledge, comprehension, understanding of everything visible, invisible that exists within the universe. And so this is their customary tribal knowledge. There has been some debate as to whether Mataranga Maori can be referred to as Maori science. Can't. It's the Maori worldview, you could refer to it as, but it's not science. Some suggest that it is not science. Science and Mataranga Maori do not seek to do the same thing, as you've rightly pointed out. Mataranga Maori is knowledge, knowing about such things, such as preparing poisonous karaka berries for eating. Science is about finding out why and how things happen, such as how and why the berries are poisonous, and how preparation removes the poison. So it's not a science, but it is a framework for a native tribe to live within New Zealand. And I'm not adverse to these frameworks.
Sounds useful for them.
Exactly. And it sounds like an interesting thing if you're a visitor.
If you're an anthropologist looking to study different cultures.
Or just a person who wants to experience, these are sort of what Steve Hughes called the sort of cosmic people, right? They don't distinguish between the real world and the spiritual world. It all blurs into one for them. And so, this is a way of existing as a human that's interesting. I don't want it to disappear or anything. And I'm sure that it'd be interesting to spend a weekend hearing about how they view the world. That'd be fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's not science. So Mataranga Maori is a knowledge base in its own right. It's Maori knowledge in values and culture, which is different from modern science. Again, as this Science Learn hub says, it belongs to the particular tribe and should remain under their control, and it should be protected. It's a cultural product of an indigenous tribe. I agree. Leave them alone to it, right? Why is the New Zealand Ministry of Business promoting it as a science? Weird, isn't it? We understand that Maori success is New Zealand's success, and that unlocking the science and innovation potential of Maori knowledge, people, and resources will benefit New Zealand. So again, it feels kind of imperial, right?
That sounds like exploitation to me.
It does, doesn't it? The imperial world controllers of New Zealand.
Maori success is their success. Leave them alone.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my point, my idea on this whole thing.
Exactly. They're currently preparing berries so they're not poisonous. Let them be. There's nothing wrong with it. But anyway, for this reason, we've embedded our vision Mataranga policy across all priority investment areas. So this is going to unlock the science potential, blah, blah, and it's to use the science and innovation system to help unlock the potential of Maori knowledge, people, and resources for the benefit of New Zealand. To recognise Maori as important partners in science and innovation. I don't think that maybe, both as intergenerational guardians of significant natural resources and indigenous knowledge, and owners and builders and managers of commercial assets, to build the capability of Maori individuals, businesses, and corporations, trusts, and various words I'm not familiar with, in order to engage with science and innovation, and to maximise the quality of relationship between the Maori and the Crown, through the science and innovation, through the Treaty of, again, words I can't pronounce. But they're not the only ones. The Environmental Protection Authority in New Zealand is doing the same thing. Mataranga has its own unique characteristics, which are as valid as, but different from, other knowledge systems, including science, according to this document.
Well, once again, it's
Gov.New Zealand.
well done, New Zealand government. Another home run. You're hitting them out of the park recently.
However, some disregard Mataranga because they perceive it as, quote, myth and legend, fantastic and implausible.
I can't really argue.
That's
if you're not a
because-
Matarangan...
Well, Maori.
Oh, if you're not a
Mataranga is
Maori.
the knowledge system. But,
Yes.
like, it's embedded with things like, oh, the river god does this. The rain god does that. The forest god does the other. Now, again, I'm in no way interested in taking away the customs and traditions of the Maori from the Maori, but it's not science. Government of New Zealand, don't know why I have to say that. It's not as valid as science for knowledge collection either. Again, not really a big fan of science myself. Kind of having a big long-running argument with Josh in the office about why science is evil and we need to abolish it. And I would quite happily choose Mataranga over science, but it's not science. It's just the case that it's not science. In fact, Mataranga includes knowledge generated using techniques consistent with the scientific approach. Really? Tell me how you've scientifically identified that the rain god causes the rains. I'm all ears. Mataranga pertains to a universal phenomenon of life experienced by all living beings, not only to knowledge specific to human beings. It makes no distinction between spiritual and material worlds, this is peak science here, which are conceived of as constantly interacting with each other. This is not scientific, right? And a bunch of academics at the University of Auckland in New Zealand pointed out, well, hang on a second. I mean, that's all well and good, but we're not going to be building rockets using Mataranga.
Tell me when these guys have figured out the combustion engine. Then maybe they're participating in something that could be called science.
Yeah, again, as Steve Hughes pointed out, these are cosmic people, and I honestly, in my dotage, I'm finding this very appealing as a sort of aesthetic phenomenon.
Caveman Carl coming out here.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not even objecting to that, but it's not science. But anyway, this was controversial back earlier this year because their objection was that they're introducing Mataranga on the science courses in universities as the equivalent of science. The main objection...
You sign up for a university course to do science.
Nope.
And you're getting taught about the river gods.
Yep, no, you got a degree in Mataranga physics. The main objection is that this particular description is part of a new course which promotes discussion, analysis of the ways in which science has been used to support the dominance of Eurocentric views, among which it's used as a rationale for the colonization of the Maori and the suppression of Maori knowledge. And the notion that science is a Western European invention is itself evidence of European dominance over Maori and other indigenous peoples.
I think science being evidence of any kind of dominance is just that those there's more scientifically advanced nations were able to build bigger empires. I'd say that's enough evidence as it is.
Maybe you should point out that science didn't begin in Europe.
Yeah, that's also a good point.
Science began a long, long time before there was anything in Europe other than fur-wearing barbarians. But anyway, the academics say that although indigenous knowledge may play some role in the preservation of local practices and management and policy, which is completely true, because what they're talking about is the generative engine of Maori culture, right? This Mataranga is the sort of an umbrella term for a body of knowledge and practices and customs, in the same way that like English propriety is in England, right? The crown and the various institutions like the police, the courts, and various other things, like it's all underpinned by a kind of English culture that we could just describe as like what is proper for England. And this is essentially what is proper for the Maori. And I actually totally respect that. Fine. That's, you know.
And as long as they're not doing anything as long as they're not doing anything like, killing babies or sacrifice,
no, of course not.
If it helps to keep them all alive and they're all living meaningful lives in their own way, then
absolutely.
Yeah, why not just leave them alone?
Exactly. Great question. Why do we have to appropriate it? That's the question, isn't it? But this is like the world controllers of Brave New World. The reason they want to do this is to essentially homogenize New Zealand, right? Because at the moment you've got two tribes of people, the Europeans and the Maori, and they're like, yeah, but no, this isn't acceptable. We've got to merge these together. So you've got to accept that the Mataranga claims of the Maori are equal to science in order for them to merge, and that's what they're trying to do by bringing this together. But anyway, they have failed by pointing out, well, look, This may be good for the Maori, for the culture, which it is, but it falls far short of being of being what can be defined as science itself, obviously. And of course, it should not be accepted as an equivalent to science. It may help, but it's not a science. And that's true. But anyway, so this was reported on by a blog called whyevolutionIsTrue.com, and they are not happy because, as far as they're concerned, this is being pushed in by wokeists.
I mean,
colour me surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, this is obviously.
I mean, they say right there other ways of knowing, which is pure
wokeism.
Post-colonial, specifically wokeism.
Yep, that's exactly it. And so they say, here's an email I got the other day from a biology colleague in New Zealand. Now the New Zealand government is trying to insert something called Mataranga into science courses. Mataranga means the knowledge system of the Maori. It includes reference to various gods. Tane, the god of the forest, is said to be the creator of humans. Peak science. And of course not correct. It's actually the god of the Bible created humans, Adam and Eve. Duh.
Obviously, bro.
Why do we have to go over this again?
Man the sails, boys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, that's wrong. It's not Tane, the god of the forest, let me tell you. But yeah, so evolution, out of the window. Peak science. Rain happens when the goddess Papa Tanaku sheds tears. Obviously true. Duh.
How do we know when she's going to be crying?
Well, that's a great question. We don't. Maori trying to claim that they have always been scientists. So when they say Maori, what these are westernized Maori intellectuals who have been through the university system, done these post-colonial and critical theory studies, and come out saying, right, Western culture is not valid, Maori culture is valid, and we've got theoretical arguments in order to support not the arguments of the rain god, but the arguments as to why the West shouldn't be able to compare our epistemological methods to theirs.
These sound like the sorts of people who don't recognize that in doing that, they have probably become what they would consider to be like corrupted by Western culture.
Yeah, I think they view it as using the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. Yeah. Essentially, this is raw ethno-nationalism from the Maori perspective. Does
sound like it.
It very much is. Their political demand is that Mataranga must be acknowledged as the equal of Western science, and without this, Maori children will continue to fail at science in school. So, okay, well, I don't have a commentary on that, but I don't think that it is the equal of Western science when it comes to knowledge acquisition. One rationalization for this is that they are the indigenous people of New Zealand and that their knowledge deserves respect. It is a very messy situation, and the group of science academics of various stripes are engaged in fighting a rearguard action against this. They wrote a letter to The Listener, a weekly publication of reasonable respectability, in which they made the claim that Mataranga was not science and had no place in science courses, which should be fairly uncontroversial, but the kickback against them was astonishing, with some 2,000 academics around New Zealand signing a petition condemning them. I didn't even realise there were 2,000 academics in New Zealand. Just a joke. Further, the Royal Society of New Zealand is taking 2 of the academics involved to task with the likely outcome of their dismissal from the society. They have, of course, been accused of racism.
Of course.
Wokeism is well underway here. Yeah,
it sounds like it.
So this is, of course, completely consistent with intersectional social justice. Science is a white construct because it's a product of European thought, which means they've tried to localize science and ethnicize it to Europeans because the Enlightenment was a localized phenomenon in Europe, and produced a rationalistic analysis of everything. And so they think that if a non-European does science, then it's essentially like a form of cultural appropriation. Right? It'd be like a European sacrificing captives of war, Aztec style, to appease the sun god, to make sure the sun rises the next day.
And if they want to, even if you want to take that framing of it, it's like, okay, you're doing science, you're probably going to improve certain standards of living. Okay,
yeah, I mean,
I don't care if you're appropriating my culture. If you want to look at it as my culture,
feel free.
Yeah, go ahead.
But the point is, there are demonstrable results from science that that transcend all cultures, right?
Yeah. Like women being able to survive birth, for instance.
Yes, and this is part of the sort of universal man phenomenon that I've talked about before. But anyway, they send a screenshot of the letter, and it's a pretty standard defense of the sciences as a rationalistic enterprise that is available to all rational beings. Again, this is like Kant's kingdom of ends, in which any rational legislator can become a moral legislator. It's exactly the same principle where, and it is something that came out of Europe, but it is not confined to Europe, that it is essentially the supremacy of reason. And so anyone who can use reason can become a scientist. They say, they're looking for the discovery of empirical universal truths and coming up against the parochial, particular native culture of the Maori. And so this is being framed as a tribal culture, the tribe of the Europeans and the tribe of the Maori at odds. But anyway, I don't want to go through it in too much detail because we're out of time. But this is, as you can imagine, something that the wokists are using to persecute these rationalistic scientists for not being culturally sensitive to the Maoris. I think you can describe it as. And so a panel was set up to investigate the signatories of this open letter, denouncing a one Professor Cooper, who had to be replaced. And so all 5 complainants were anonymous, and then the society made them identify themselves. 3 fell by the wayside, as in rescinded their position, but 2 remain, and an investigation is proceeding apace with a panel that is essentially turning into a cultish trial that's judging these defenders of science for taking part in an ethnic attack on the New Zealand natives.
This literally sounds like some kind of religious persecutors
Yes.
manning the Inquisition against science.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Yes, Galileo.
Yes.
How dare you? That's literally, but it's being framed in the language of wokeness as in this is an ethnic attack by white people against Aboriginals. And it's like, well, not really. And why would, if that's the case, then how is it not an ethnic attack when the Aboriginals insist on having their own, native knowledge systems imposed on university science courses?
Yeah, when they have no place.
Exactly. If you're, I agree that, if you're talking about the aesthetic culture, the aesthetic culture of the Maori, then sure, you can say that science has got no place there. But by converse logic, then they have no place in the science. Well, so,
surely they accept that what they're participating in is not science.
Well, no, they don't. That's the point. But anyway, so the University of Auckland has disavowed these academics.
Of course.
Obviously. And they honestly, it's really weird how the whole thing is just so insufferably woke. But a few quotes from the letter that was written by the president of the Psychological Society, I think it is, Dr. I can't pronounce this, Waikaramona Waitoki or something. They say, I believe it is important that we express our disappointment in a recent letter to the listener, which is the paper, by professors of psychology, biological science, and critical studies. See, critical studies coming into this.
Yeah.
We also wish to express our support and aroa for those who were and continue to be negatively affected by the letter's content. We note that the letter is not subject to the established protocols of rigor and peer review and such. Appealing to science. Weird. The contents reflect opinion, not science. So it's not scientific to point out that something that involves river gods is not scientific. Amazing.
Yeah, very rigorous.
Yeah, if only we had a science to appeal to. But the University of Auckland academics should be like, yeah, but the river god told us it was this way. Prove us wrong,
Yeah, checkmate.
Yeah, but anyway, in reviewing the letter, it's readily apparent that racist tropes are used, alongside comments typical of moral panic to justify the exclusion of Maori knowledge as a legitimate science. So unless you accept Maori knowledge about the tears of the rain goddess falling to the earth, you're a racist.
What moral panic is there by just going, well, science is kind of an established thing, sorry?
Well, because it's going to undermine science, frankly. I guess that's the moral panic. But the point is, the fangs are in and the critical theorists are biting down hard, appealing to science to justify the subversion of science. The irony. How could anyone go along with this, right? But anyway, they further add that science itself does not colonize, while acknowledging that it has been used to aid colonization. This is similar to saying guns don't kill people, people kill people. But it's also true.
Yes.
Science doesn't colonize, people colonize. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Any more questions? And they finish by complaining about the white savior trope. This is where the Maori are told which elements of our indigenous knowledge is important and to whom. Well, from the perspective of a European, that's all they can do, because it's not their knowledge, is it? And so if you've got something that is scientifically true inside of a tradition, and I believe that traditions can contain things that are empirically and scientifically true, and this is one of the values of tradition, in fact. Let me get on my Burkean high horse defending the Maori knowledge system. But the writers speaking for the Maori offer the opinion Indigenous knowledge is critical to the perpetuation and preservation of local cultural practices and plays key roles in management and policy. The writers relegate Maori knowledge to archival value, ceremony, management, and policy, although it's not clear what was meant here. So, as I said, right, they're defending a tribal culture by defending their method of creating their own knowledge, knowledge which is not really knowledge as science would recognize it, but it is a kind of cultural sort of thick ethical knowledge that is rooted in a time and place and specific to a particular people. But by this standard, by a non-mythological standard, set by rationalist politics is from where science grows, which makes it universal. So these two things are incompatible. One is science and the other certainly isn't.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site.
We've got loads on there and it's all really, really good. For example, we have regular premium articles that discuss contemporary events, and we have an audio track for our silver and gold tier members. And of course, we have our regular series on there. We've got Contemplations, which is Josh and whoever he wants to have talk to him about a particular topic. On this one, he's talking to Bo, about in-group preference. Moving on. Bo and myself also do the Epoch series, which says talking about history. This one's Belisarius Part 3, because Belisarius was a 6th century Byzantine general, and he had an amazing career and a genuinely tragic end. And the myth of him is old blind Belisarius begging on the streets of Rome would have been better than what happened to him, but I won't spoil it. I'll let you find out. And of course, we do our regular book club as well this week's or this month's. I don't know how often we do them actually. Fairly regularly. It takes a while to read a book. But this is Callum doing John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, in which I rail against utilitarianism. I used to be a huge fan of John Stuart Mill, like 5-10 years ago. And since then, I've really soured on utilitarianism. And so the framing of his arguments, I find kind of insufferable. He's not wrong in what he's arguing for, but it's the way he's doing it. But anyway, we also do a bunch of premium podcasts, things that are entertaining, we think, like the politics of Star Trek that I did with John, talking about, well, is Star Trek a socialist paradise or not? It turns out it's not, but it's something different. Post-scarcity liberalism, basically. But that's a really good podcast. And we also have to put up things on the website that we can't actually put on YouTube because YouTube has editorial policies about things such as where all these heart attacks are coming from. Giant elephant in the room. It's probably climate change. Don't worry about it. We also have fascinating interviews from really interesting people, such as this one, which is an activist called Luke Avery, who's a Christian, but don't worry, he's not Bible thumping in this. What he's doing is talking about the ancient wisdom in the biblical book of Proverbs, and it's very much daddist sort of stuff, and I really enjoyed doing this one. And I think I'll have him back in, hopefully, to do another one, Ecclesiastes or something, and hopefully we'll do another one soon.
And if you want to keep up with us, you can follow us on getter.com. I love the phrase and getter doing, something like that. I don't know.
You're doing really well on there, though, aren't you? You've got like 11,000 followers.
So come follow me on Getter, come follow you on Getter.
Yeah. And lotuseaters.com on Getter.
Lotuses_com on there. Let's go check that out. And also the conference itself. So this is a conference being put on by the Getter guys. This is on the December the 8th. So update on this, the Getter conference has been postponed until further notice. We will let people know as soon as we have more information. Apparently it was postponed thanks to the global freakout in response to the Omicron variant. So sorry about that. So if you'd like to get access to all that premium content, you can subscribe at lotuseaters.com. Thank you and goodbye.